Deathbringer here. Ready to toss your dice and your morals into the abyss? Then back the Roll for Combat Kickstarter, weaklings. It's packed with hundreds of savage, blood-soaked options to obliterate your enemy. And better yet, you'll get to use them in my game, the Deathbringer RPG. Coming next year, the Deathbringer RPG isn't some soft, cuddlecore fantasy nonsense. It's fast, mean, and completely unforgiving. In Deathbringer, you don't save the world. You stab it in the heart, loot the corpse, and set it on fire for good measure. Every backer of the Roll for Combat Secret Tomes for Shadowdark Kickstarter will get an exclusive sneak peek at the glorious carnage of Deathbringer and a chance to play in the beta test later this year. So sharpen your blade, sell your soul, and back it now. Ignore me and I'll use your spine as a bookmark. Back now.
It's time for Roll for Combat!
Hey, look at that. I got it working.
Wait, you're both of us.
I changed it.
Oh, okay.
I was both of us for a split second. we were there. Didn't we just do this? I don't know. I've been away for a full week. I literally just came back last night. So I left and we did the show. And then I went to PAX, and then I came back, and we're doing the show. And I asked Derek if he wanted to do the show, and he was like, "Hell no," because he just came back last night. I spent every waking.
I bet he did his show while he was there, though, right?
For once, I was there with him, but he's going to do a show tonight. But every waking moment I spent with Derek for a week. So Derek and I spent every waking moment together. Yeah. So I now know more about Derek than ever anyone should know about Derek. So anyhow,
there you go. You've gained. You're now a master in Derek lore.
I am legendary in Derek lore. I'm getting up there. I mean, well, many of his stories are repeating, so I'm. It's getting to that point. So, but I spent more time with Derek in 1 week than I think I spent with my wife in 1 year. So.
Wow, there you go.
Actually, it's probably true.
But what about compared to Alan? Your lawyer.
Well, because I only talk to him once in a while. So we're literally, because we're staying in the same room. So I was seeing him all day, all night. I saw Derek. So anyhow, it was interesting. PAX West was a weird con, actually. It was very... Derek's going to talk a lot about it on his show if you want to. He'll probably talk about it tonight. But it's extreme. Well, the one thing was... It was at a convention center. There's two convention centers in PAX, and there's like the old one and the new one.
Right.
The old one is the Arch. I never even went to it. That's like where all the video games was. But the new one is called the Summit. This is, it's so big. It is the size of like multiple football fields. It's just one big rectangle, and it's gigantic. It is so big. Multiple football fields in size, and it's 6 stories high, and that's all it is. And that's where we were. And let me tell you, that was amazing because it was brand new convention center. Everything was clean. Everything was state of the art. The whole thing was carpeted. Everything carpeted. So it was nice. It was just, I can't describe it. It was like having a brand new convention center is like a world of difference. And having everything carpeted was just everything. It's just nice. And everyone there was so nice. As we found out, because turns out they're not union, because there was like some demonstration going on to try to make everyone in the convention center union. Because Derek and I were like, wow, everyone here is so nice. Everyone was like the nicest people I've ever seen when I went to a convention. And now we know why, because not that union people are mean, but they were definitely a subtle difference. Because when you go to other conventions, they make you pay for everything. Like if you want to roll a tape, they make you pay for it. If you want an extra table, it's like $500. You know, a chair is like $2,000. I'm not joking. It's like, these are the prices. It's so ridiculous. Here, they're like coming by. They're giving us extra tables. They're giving us extra chairs. They gave us tape. Whatever you wanted, they had it. They just handed it out. Like
I see what you mean. As opposed to whether they were friendly or not, it was more about that they were generous.
No, they were both.
They were
also
generous with their what the amenities because there weren't rules that required them to charge a certain amount.
well, not only that, but they were super nice. They were the nicest people. So anyhow, but yeah, it's like it's not like Gen Con where you sign up for stuff. You just go and you just do whatever you want, and they just have a lot of open gaming, and you just have to. There's a lot of lines. You just stand on lines. So, yeah, it was an interesting con. So, anyhow, yes. So we met a ton of new people. There was definitely a lot of video game people there.
Yeah, it's mostly a video game convention.
Yeah. I mean, most of the people would come up to us and not even, the number one question was like, "What is this?" So that was kind of like the big question we were getting.
Were you able to answer the "What is this" question?
Well, the first thing we say is, "Do you play Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder?" And 90% of them would say no, and then we would have to say, "Oh, okay."
Even in the second building that was for not the video game building.
Yes. I'd say.
What else was there? I guess board games mostly.
There's not that many people there. I mean, there wasn't that many vendors. I mean, even there weren't that many.
I get that, but if
it's not that many video game
talking
vendors.
about the people who chose to leave the main building that had the video games and go to the auxiliary building,
I don't know.
And then even then, 90% of them didn't play D&D and Pathfinder. There must have been board games or something that drew them there.
Just a few. I don't know. I think they spent their money, so they wanted to see everything.
I guess so. Maybe they were curious and they're like, "What is even over here in this new building?"
No, like a lot of people. Like I'd say 95% of the people came over would say, "What is this?" And we would say, "Do you play D&D or Pathfinder?" And they either say no or they say, "Oh, I've always wanted to," and that's as far as we got. And that was the difference, because we're like, well, you can't really buy our books unless you play those because they're supplements. So, it's a little different, but still a good con. Still met a lot of new people and explained to them what things were. What was weird is Eldamon, we didn't sell a single Eldamon on the first day. Not one, which was weird. But then we sold a ton after that. So
interesting.
Yeah,
it's always interesting.
strange.
The first days are not supposed to be necessarily the best days, but they were actually pretty good for us at both PAX East and Gen Con.
Yeah, the first day was fine. The second day, first, second, and third day were mostly the same. It was the fourth day was what we expected because it was Monday. So we had a ton of people in the morning, and then and that was the other thing. Like people, like you're not allowed to like set up during the con. People were setting up during the con. People were tearing down before the con was over. Like these are all big no-nos, and like all the rules were being broken. That's what, as a con goer, you probably don't notice any of this, but as someone who has to set up for the cons, the rules are very strict, and like all the rules at any other con were basically being broken. That's why I said it was kind of a weird convention. Anyhow,
yeah, that is pretty weird.
So
one of the
things I wanted to talk about, because I was thinking about this, because when I was talking to people, because some people were asking where you were, Mark. Not a lot, but a few people. And I said...
Hey, so there were some people who knew us that
were
there.
No, there was definitely some. I mean, but not compared to like Gen Con, where it was like thousands. Here it was
Gen Con, they all knew us. That was great.
It was like 10, 20 people who knew us here. And then I was explaining like what you do versus what I do. And that's where I was thinking of this. And we were... and obviously I've been thinking a lot about this generally just because there's so many games out now. Like, so I got this finally. I finally found my Mythic Bastion Land.
You got Mythic Bastion Land.
Finally. Of course, Chris isn't around. I'll have him sign it later. And I'm reading this over. And I'm just, so here's what's happening. So in the world of video games, there was a big phenomenon going on very, very recently for the last couple of years, where roguelikes were taking over the world. And the main reason why roguelites were taking over is because when it comes to creating video games, a roguelite is a lot easier to create than a non-roguelite. So roguelite is a video game where the rooms and the properties of the game are basically randomized. Oh. Derek, you should join us, you piece of crap. your bill for your book included in your invoice. Wow. Okay. Real nice of you. Real
He
nice,
also paid
Derek.
back $2 of the dollars of that invoice to tell you that.
I said I was going to pay you for it. I couldn't find it, and then I found it. So anyhow, so I lost track of whatever the hell I was.
You were saying that roguelikes are easier to make than a non-roguelike because of the procedural generation of some of the elements of it.
So it's very easy to make a very deep game because all you really need to do is put together some general assets and randomize them and you basically make a game from randomized assets. And then I was thinking a lot about this OSR and the OSR world where a lot of these games are mostly random tables. They come up with
there
small...
are Oracle tables that can allow you to play one player, for example, or GM-less.
Mm-hmm. So, but the big advantage of these roguelike games is that they can be done by a very small team, like 1 or 2 people. They give huge amounts of gameplay for a development cycle and time and cost that's like 1/10 of what it would be for a AAA or a larger game or a platform game. So think of it this way: is that these roguelikes are procedurally generated games that build themselves, that offer challenge over time.
Sometimes when things are unbalanced in a roguelike, people will be not like, oh, the game designer's messed up. They'd be like, oh yeah, that was the random thing there was pretty unfair, and I lost that run, but now I can start another run, and I probably won't have the same thing happen.
Exactly, and that's the other thing. It's a lot more forgiving, as opposed to we'll take the Grand Theft Autos of the world or any other game that everything is built and everything has to be accounted for. From beginning to end, like Baldur's Gate 3. Like Baldur's Gate 3 is the complete opposite end, where everything possible you can think of had to be developed and built. And they had to voice it for multiple languages, and it's endless, like literally endless design. And in my mind, you have the games like D&D and Pathfinder and Starfinder, which are kind of the Baldur's Gate 3s of the world, which are, they require just a gargantuan amount of work to build these games. Because just think of it this way: if you have levels, this is what I tell people when they're designing games, is like if they're going to say, okay, my game's going to go from level 1 to 20, I was like, that's great. You have to have monsters, and it's like, forget about the math for 1 to 20, forget about the spell system, forget about the treasure, but you just have to have monsters from level 1 to 20, and that's a huge amount of work, because you need to have... If you just say, okay, I need at least 10 monsters for every level, and really you need more than that, more especially at the bottom levels, that could be thousands of monsters, at least hundreds of monsters.
I mean, that's 200 already with 10 for every level.
Right. And you really need more than that. So you need hundreds and hundreds of monsters. And when you start seeing that, it gets out of control.
Spells also get out of control.
Right.
They're just there are a lot of things. 20 doesn't seem like a lot, but it turns out that it is. That's why some game systems only have 10 levels. For example.
It seems to be a lot of games are doing that now. But anyhow, so I was looking at these OSR games, and a lot of them, and I look at them and I think, okay, these games are very similar to the roguelites, is that they have light rule sets, they have a million random tables, so you can, quote, build whatever you want, and they don't have to worry about creating adventures or creating worlds, because they're like, we just make tables and the tables do the work for us. And I then think about the difference between, and we were talking to some people during the convention, of like D&D, because we sell D&D and Pathfinder products, versus there was a guy next to us who was selling a very OSR product that seemed pretty cool. And, his rule book, of course, was, like super thin, and that was like the whole game. It's just like little small rule book. And also the history of D&D, and how I was saying to some people, like, I really like the math. Like, we like the math, we like the crunch. I like how much, you really have to sit here and figure out the theory crafting, it's called, behind behind all the game. And if you have people in, MMOs like World of Warcraft, there's a lot of theory crafting where they're trying to figure out the math. They don't have direct access to it, so they have to figure it out backwards, and they figure out like what the best combos are and everything.
I mean, if you think the math in any tabletop RPG, even D&D or Pathfinder, which have more, if you think that is anything, you don't even want to get into video games, because video games have sometimes actual complicated math.
Oh yeah, video games are nothing but math. That is a video game.
Yeah,
video games
there's
are
so
math.
much math behind the hood of the video games. It's just that the computer does it for you, so you don't know. In a tabletop RPG, the amount of math that the actual players and GMs will do is like the most basic arithmetic of all time. Now, that's not saying it doesn't take mental load or slow you down, or that it couldn't be complex to do it, but it is basic math. Now, it also doesn't mean that there aren't more complicated math that you can use to analyze it, right? Because analysis of math is more complicated than the math itself. You can use complex probability distributions to model the possibility of certain abilities working or failing and how much damage that they'll do, that are vastly more complicated in the math than like the actual math of the game. Or when you're creating the game, when you're creating an economic model for how much the items cost, you can wind up even using a little bit of calculus to create the curve of like how the prices change and update, where you say, okay, I want the second derivative to hit inflection points at these various levels for a particular reason. So it's not to say you can't use complex math with tabletop, but the players and GMs don't need it strictly to play. Whereas if you were trying to play any of those video games without a computer, it would just be impossible for most games, which have generally very complex math. With there's a few exceptions to that. Something like Fire Emblem, where it's just like, okay, I'm going to directly deal damage equal to the strength of my weapon plus the strength of my strength stat minus their defense stat or something like that. That is actually simple enough. Maybe you could do it in it.
Yeah, I mean, someone even just wrote the D&D math is simple. You have like first person, third person shooters. Like the math in video games, especially shooters, where they have to figure it is like it will melt your brain. It is incredible. It is basically, if you work for a video game company, it's nothing but math. It's kind of insane. But my point is that if you look at D&D back in the day, which was based off of miniature board gaming,
chainmail,
which was math. It was like math and tables, and everything was percentages. It was like everything was based on percentages and percentages of what these fighters would do, and there was no role playing. It was just like these fighters are against these. This battalion is versus against this battalion, and here's the weather and the conditions and the morale, and let's roll dice and figure out what happens. And then over time, it became both a combination of role playing versus math. And now I like to think of like we have these games that are role playing based, and the math is almost there just to add to the role playing, as opposed to D&D and especially Pathfinder and Starfinder, which, well, the math is a key aspect of the game. It's actually what defines the game in a lot of ways. And as you were the one who wrote it, I wanted to talk to you about it, because I remember when Pathfinder first came out, the first thing I did was look at the math, and I was like, okay, the math is so good. It looks like it really works well, especially at high levels and, and so forth. And I was really excited because it felt like it was a very fair game. And that's the other thing about why the math matters, is because, like, okay, is it a storytelling game of role playing where people are just talking? In which case, I guess the math doesn't really matter, and it doesn't really matter what you're doing. Or is it a game where it has to be balanced, and you have to have a fair fight, or at least, or use the math of the game to figure out what, like how to play tactically, in which role playing is an aspect of the game, but the math is the actual part of the game. So Now,
I think it also just depends on your group's play style. Like obviously you have a very math focused play style. That's even why you describe the role playing game as it doesn't really matter what you're doing. But I would say a role play person who would heavily role play would say it in a slightly different bias from the way that you describe it. They would say, is it a role playing game where your characters role playing and choices, decision, and personality matter? Or is it just some game where nothing really matters because all that matters was that you rolled really badly on this dice and somehow your master swordsman just trips and falls on his shoelaces? So, like, there are different viewpoints on different sides of it, and I think that they can all be cogent in the way that they love games. But I also think that the best way to do it is to combine both. Thinking that, like, the math and the mechanics are distinct from the role playing is something known as the Stormwind fallacy online. I think that math and mechanics each strengthen each other when they're used together. Or sorry, mechanics and role playing, which math and mechanics on one side, role playing and getting into your character and thinking about the world and its narrative on the other side. So if you allow them to complement each other, you can often find that you get emergent gameplay due to the math or due to the die rolls that sort of give you some of the benefits that you were talking about from roguelikes of this unexpected. Whereas if you lean too heavily on the math to do everything for you, or you lean on the role play and just say, well, I give a really good speech, I shouldn't have to roll a diplomacy check.
well, that I get a lot. I hear that all the time. Like people say, or the verse, it goes both ways. I've heard people say, well, I don't want to talk. I just want to roll my diplomacy or my charisma because that's why I have it. Or the other one is, I just gave you a really big speech. Do I get a plus on my bonus, my roll or something like that? That's where it gets kind of strange. And
Yeah.
it's just like when we used to play D&D back in first edition or even second, I even say third, like the game was math. Like we role played what we said and did and our characters and our motivations. But in the end of the day, everything came down to a roll. And I feel like with today's game, it's almost the opposite. But then is it even a game? Like, is it a game when you are just talking? I'm like, I don't think that's really a game. There's no gamification in it. It's just talking. There's no rules. They say there's rules, but then when people are optionally using them, are there really rules? And I also think of board games because, like, board games, well, you can't just make up a board game rules. Like, board games are, the definition there is hard coded as can be. Like, you cannot just say, oh, you know what? I'm playing a board game and I rolled a 5, but I'm going to give a real impassioned speech. Can I turn that into a 7? I'm like, no, that's not how it works. That's not how this list says it right in the rules. That's like, this is a board game. When you roll, this is what happens, But yet with role playing games, it's like, oh, can I give a real impassioned speech and get a +2 on my roll now? It's like, you're like, okay, sure. Or, it's just. I find that the degradation of math from role-playing games and how it's turning into just everyone's just talking and having fun, at least for me, is sort of, is it a game anymore if all we're doing is talking?
Are they having fun? You definitively said that they were. You said they were just talking and having fun. Now, if
but it's not,
taking away
but
the
then
math
it's not
actually
really a
made some of the
game.
players not have fun and only the other players did, which can happen. If you have some players who are really into the math, they want fairness, they want expectations, and they just are getting confused by other people who are maybe the talkative one or the pushy one who just gets whatever they want from the GM. It can be that it makes it so that everyone's not having fun. But if they're having fun, then what's the harm? One strategy that I think is good that I think Amy Lowe Riley, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, in chat also said that they were doing, is to sometimes you can roll first before you try to figure out what the role play is. And this can help you, especially if you're playing a very swingy system, like anything with a D20, like D&D and Pathfinder. With a D20, the chances of getting extreme values, like a natural 20 or a natural 1, are equally likely as getting a median value, unlike systems where you roll, say, multiple d6s and add them together or something like that. And so because you have no idea whether the thing you're doing is going to be an absolute fumble or an amazing success, it can be nice to roll first and see what you got. And if you get a natural one, then maybe you shouldn't give that giant speech that everyone applauds afterwards in real life and said that was the best speech of your life, because your character didn't give a speech that was that good. They got a natural one. And
by the way, that's
so
the way.
If you roll first, it can actually help you. It can give you a prompt to role play, because most people, a lot of players, they want to do well. They want to see their character succeed for the most part. And so if you're just playing normally, you're always going to try, for a lot of people, to give a good speech or to give a good argument. Sometimes it can be fun if you're like, okay, so the dice said that you got a natural one. Let's just have fun with it. What was the terrible thing that you said? It can be a little bit fun when you're being prompted to give the negative or bad thing, to just come up with it and say something really insulting, for instance.
Well, by the way, so that's how we play. So my group plays, they roll, and then they base their RP based off the roll. So exactly what you said is like, they'll do a roll, and then they'll get a 1, and they'll be like, okay, you are, and then they joke because how terrible they are. Or, and again, if they roll 20, then they joke how fantastic and how amazing they are at something, and we never do the opposite. But maybe that's my issue, is that it's the opposite. When people do the opposite, is that they want to then role play and change their roles and the results of their roles based on them role-playing, because it's a, quote, role-playing game. Well, then why even have the dice in the first place? Why even have the math? Why even have it there? If you can just change it based on you talking. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think the roll-first idea, and people in the chat are saying they like it. Some of them hadn't thought of it before, but if you use it, it really helps.
That's all we do
fix
in my
the
games.
Ludo narrative dissonance that you will have there. Because, look, I get it. Even though at my tables, if you give a really great speech and then you roll a natural 1, I'm not going to give it to you. If you gave a great speech and you brought up good points, I'll make it the check easier. I will determine your DC that you're trying to roll for based on the arguments that you made to this person. If you gave all the right things that they wanted to hear, I will make it easier. But if you, at the end of the day, if you rolled a natural 1 on it, you rolled a natural 1. And so I much prefer the idea of letting people know what they shot for so that they can try to role play. That also means if you rolled a natural 20 and you start seeing something that is really awful, that maybe, like, as the GM, I can be like, okay, so we see you rolled a nat 20 on this and your character did really well. So think about the way you're phrasing this, or if you want, you can talk to the other players. They can help you because your character just got a nat 20, is a bard who's legendary silver tongue. We don't expect anyone at this table to be that good at figuring out what to say. So we can do a brain trust here, right? Like, it's collaborative storytelling where you use the math and the dice rolls to determine where you're headed, and then you work together to find a good way to describe that. As opposed to, if you describe it first, it can be really frustrating if you gave an amazing speech and then rolled a natural 1. You can feel bad about getting that low roll, and it can cause people to be upset with the game. Some people would just want to play a different game, or even cheat their dice rolls, where they're just like, darn it, this is just feels so wrong, that they just fudge their results or other things like that. It can lead to a lot of tension. Of course, it depends on your player. Some groups like to do it in that direction, even if they aren't going to make any adjustments for it.
So what about your idea when you were building? Well, what was the philosophy behind Pathfinder? Because Pathfinder is the other end, where there is math for everything. If you want, like, you want to do research, there's math and there's rolls involved. If you want to look something up, there's math and involved. If you want to do a chase, there's math. And, you can go too far the other way. Like, a good example of that was when they did the Starship. So this was fascinating. The Starship battles in Starfinder, really, well, one of those, when I did them the first time, they worked really well, but after like the fourth or fifth time, you realized they were not working well at all. And now Starship Combat and Starfinder Second Edition is narrative based, which is fascinating. So they went from full trying to, modify it using roles and stat technique, stats and abilities to, we just kind of narrate the Starship Combat with some roles instead. Because it feels like, you can go too far the other way where you try to figure out a system for every single thing. And I've heard that complaint. So more for Pathfinder First Edition, where they really were like anything that was in the game, we tried to figure out a system for that was rollable. And some things just, some things work better. Like combat just works. Combat almost has to be done with some math involved. Because you can't, I guess you could describe it, but, combat is, especially if you want a skill-based gaming system, you need math involved. It's where it gets iffy if you're talking about, I don't know, a chase sequence or research or talking to somebody, where it's like, well, that's something, quote, I can do in real life. So, and I'm really good at it, but it's my character's bad at it, like, maybe in real life you're extremely charismatic, but you're playing a character with like a 6 charisma. So, they have a hard time playing that type of character because they feel like, well, I should be able to do this, but that's not what they're playing. Like, what was the theory behind what should be, governed by math versus what shouldn't be when you were making
So I think it's very essential if you're trying to make a big tent game, by which I mean a game that will accept a very wide variety of players.
Mm-hmm.
That it's very important that you need to be able to handle players who have very different viewpoints on that question.
Mm-hmm.
And so Pathfinder Second Edition isn't going to force you to do things in any particular way. Whereas I think for smaller indie games, that they often can make very bold decisions where it's just like, no, you have to do it only this way. Because it's not intended to be the kind of game that has to fulfill like very, very widely disparate viewpoints. It's kind of like when people talk about games like D&D or Pathfinder or the bigger games, and they talk about them as being like a fast food place in a good way, not in the bad way of fast food being the worst food possible, but in the good way of it being something that you can go to a franchise like across the world, and it's done in it's kind of done in a similar enough way. It's generic enough that it appeals to anybody, if you see what I mean. Pathfinder generally has answers to a lot of the questions that you would ask, but it also tells the GM that they can make their own call in a lot of situations. It does say to the GM, you can adjust the difficulty class. I do it all the time. You can give a circumstance bonus based on what the players decide to do. And all the examples of subsystems heavily encourage circumstance bonuses, different difficulty classes if you do just the right thing. And so in that way, it's kind of a blend of the math and the decisions and the role plays, as I would say, is the default for Pathfinder, but some groups will do more heavily on the math and some will do more heavily on the role play. And that's great, because maybe you like the role play more, or maybe you don't. Maybe your group is generally shy. Everybody is. Nobody really wants to do the speech. You kind of just want to roll and move on through the diplomacy parts. And you can. The problem is when you have a mismatch and one player, especially like you were saying, Stephen, if you have a mismatch where one player is really, really either charismatic or at least very loud and won't stop talking, and their character has low charisma, and everyone else in the party kind of doesn't want to deal with it, you can sometimes have situations where they wind up talking and then you're not sure what to do next. Do you just give it to them, but their character has no skills at it? So you're discouraging the person who put their skill ranks into it. It can be sometimes a mess and something that you have to figure out either at session 0 or among the other players.
So you're basically just saying you just play the system for the people and they have to all agree on what you're playing in a way, like,
or at least be close enough to each other that you don't have two people who are diametrically opposed, and you can meet in the middle and compromise a bit. Yeah, because if your group, which is very much math first, we're playing with a group that was very narrative, even in Pathfinder 2, and you both agreed you were playing Pathfinder 2, I think you could find that you clashed with each other a decent amount if you didn't talk to each other first and find a compromise, or just to decide, well, our styles are too different. Maybe we shouldn't play together.
well, maybe that's the problem, or not problem, but maybe that's what's going on with D&D, because D&D, my biggest issue with 5th edition in some ways is that they hide a lot of the math, and the math seems to be all over the place. And, quite frankly, when you have 1st edition D&D, which was all math, and then you even have, say, 4th edition D&D, which was all math, like 4th edition D&D, which is why it was so good. I mean, that was actually the thing. 4th edition D&D was so good because the math was so good. I mean, it really was basically a miniatures game in the end. And
Steven says that in a good way. To be clear, there may be people in chat or later on in a comment who are like, people always insulted it by saying it was a miniatures game.
Oh, no. It was fantastic. I mean, it was a great game. It just wasn't a great Dungeons and Dragons game, but it's a fantastic game. And I loved it, but I felt like the role playing actually, because the math was so strong, it was like playing a miniatures game and then trying to role play a miniatures game, and it was hard. I felt like actually it was the opposite, is that it was really, really hard to role play, at least for me and my group, because the math and the rules were so tight. And now you have D&D 5th edition, which seems to be leaning more and more heavily into the role playing aspect. And so you can't seem to win, because when they ignore the rules and try to add more role playing and less math and less roles, one group is upset. Like, they're always upsetting a group. And that's the problem when you have a game that is so big,
right.
like D&D. Right. Like, it's always upsetting someone.
Some people in the industry who don't watch and pay attention to who's being upset are just like, you can't please anyone. When we make this decision, everyone's mad. When we make that decision, everyone's mad. The truth is, it's not that everyone's mad no matter what. It's that one group is mad one way and another group is mad the other way. And they're being consistent about their own views. But unfortunately, it's the internet where mostly only the people who are mad are going to show up and talk to you. So you can find that if you have to make a choice, let's say role playing versus math. I don't think that's how people really, really see things most of the time. But let's say that was it. You could be like, okay, I'm going to sacrifice role play for math, and find that 90% of the comments you get online are angry, upset comments. How could you sacrifice role play for math? This is terrible. I don't like math. And then you'll be like, okay, we're going to sacrifice math for more role play. And then, but now we'll get 90% good comments. And only 10%. And no, you still get 90% negative comments. How could you do this? How could you sacrifice the math for roleplay? That's just unfortunately how feedback and especially the internet are. But I think you're right on that in general. The one thing I would say about 5e and the math and hiding the math is that hiding the math is not always a bad thing, especially if you can do it in a way that makes the game easier and more efficient to play, but still has the math for the important parts where the math exists. I would say it's not to its detriment. The one place where I would say maybe hiding the math is just like, it's unclear why they did it to me and seems like it's a nasty move for no reason, is when they made a monster creation system that they themselves, and published it in the Dungeon Master's Guide, they themselves said they did not use to create monsters because it was inaccurate. It was heavily inaccurate and would not create balanced monsters compared to the one they used in-house. Well, that's the only thing. When I think of everything about the math that where they maybe hid the math or did other things, it's like, you know what? That's a design decision. It has pros and cons, but that seems purely negative. Why would you give someone a flawed product for monster creation?
Well, that,
and if they hadn't admitted that it wasn't the one they used, maybe they'd be like, no, we really do use this, even though the numbers don't add up. That would at least be somewhat consistent, where it's like, well, they think that they used it, but they didn't. But they admitted that they didn't use it. And I find that to be a weird and kind of unusual take. And it is true in Pathfinder that the monster creation system that is published is the same one that is used in Pathfinder. Like everything is revealed. And I guess like they wanted to keep it as a secret sauce to just make sure their monsters were better. But as a result, it just made it harder for everybody to create monsters.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that is a big no-no. Like the two big no-nos, it's like one, they hid the math behind creating monsters because like that I can't it was like that and the gold system because like okay, you need as a GM, they want GMs to create monsters. They want GMs to create adventures, but then they're not giving them the tools to create these monsters and adventures. And the first one is, well, you need the math on how monsters are created, especially because the fighting is obviously the fighting, the classes, the weapons, the armor, it's all math driven. I mean, that's just it. You can't role play for combat. I mean, I guess you could, but you don't in 5e or Pathfinder. So by not giving you accurate rules on how to build monsters and how the math works, I feel like that I never thought about it till now. It's like that kind of broke the coven between me and the game because I'm like, well, if I can't do it, then why bother? Like you're not giving you expect me to do this work and then you're literally not giving me the tools to do this work, which makes me not believe or trust in your product. As opposed to Pathfinder, which said like, here's literally the rules. And not only do they work, but you can check them against our own monsters and you see that they work because we use the exact same rules. And that is a big problem. Like that's a big problem. And then obviously the other thing is that the reward system for fights is gold and magic items. And again, in Pathfinder, they give out exactly how it works. And then and we had to reverse engineer it for 5e. In 5e, they didn't tell you at all. Like they just, and it works in a weird way because it's like it's a scaling curve where you start off with like 30 gold to 300 gold to 30,000 gold to 3 million gold. Like those scalings that never works well because you never want to have the curve when it comes to pretty much anything. The curves always break pretty quickly. By the way, fun little fact that World of Warcraft started off with a curve. And once they started getting above level 60, then the numbers, if you guys remember, like if anyone played World of Warcraft, the numbers were getting into the millions and like billions because it was getting out of control when they were going to like level 70 and 80 and 90. The numbers were just mind-boggling too tall. So they had, if you remember, they had the big crunch during World of Warcraft where they reset everything and brought it way down because they only really built the game up to level 60. But if you use the same curve past level 60, the numbers were getting completely out of control. And they eventually wanted to go up to level 100. And they realized like the numbers at level 100 would be like in the trillions, and they're like, oh, okay, we can't have numbers go that big and we have to redo it. So. But a game
it makes sense. Yeah. Like building those curves for economy is tricky and is done usually in a logarithmic scale, which is why they wound up in trillions. Like I get it. Like when we were working on Pathfinder 2nd edition, I made a very complex piecewise function for everybody that was in logarithmic scale that did exactly what we wanted in terms of like when it became cheaper to branch out to other items because of the fact that the increase of item cost had gone down a little bit for certain levels and then it went back up again at the end of levels, and it was kind of like it was very complicated. I'm sure World of Warcraft did that too. But the curve that I made, if then later somebody said, guess what? We're going to use the exact same curve and now we're going to level 30 or 40. Yeah, that those numbers would have gotten wildly out of control because they were sharply increasing at the very final levels to make like the 20th level items like very prestige items. And you would have just wound up with paying drastic amounts of gold pieces for your 40th level items.
So, I mean, I mean, so for Pathfinder, there's a logarithmic scale, but it's very tiny. Like it goes up, but very little. It doesn't go up that much. But I will say it's kind of funny because by the time we were level 20, these guys are getting 10,000 gold here, 10,000 gold there, and because everything costs so much, it was like kind of a joke. But now they're playing level 1 again, and I was like, you find 5 gold, and they're like, ooh. They're all excited because they forgot what it was like to have like less than 10,000 gold pieces at a time. It was like everything was just so high. But I will say the combat, works so well in Pathfinder because it's so flat. Like it never felt out of control. It just never did, even a level. And we played all the way. So anyhow, what do you guys? I mean, we're just talking here.
Yeah, I see a lot of people talking about different game systems they're playing and some of the math that they find for their group to be effective. They were joining us to talk a little bit about the fact that the 5e monster creation system was not the same one that they actually used to make monsters.
Yeah, I mean, I feel
also there was someone who said that they think that it was intentional because then you would have to buy their books of monsters instead of homebrewing your own monster. And I don't think, I mean, obviously there had to have been some motive that was somewhere along those lines, but it just doesn't make sense to me that they want to discourage the ability to homebrew because they seem to be encouraging homebrewing in other aspects of the game. And like, if anything, the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide, and I say this as someone who loves homebrewing so much, I became a game designer. But if anything, the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide is perhaps too pro homebrew in the sense that it starts the book with some like very high level homebrew stuff before it gets into the meat and potatoes. Something they fixed in the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, by the way, is a much better order and organization for a typical person starting to be the dungeon master. But I feel that the organization of the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide strongly suggests that they were pro homebrewing, or they wouldn't have organized it that way.
So, yeah, I mean, again, I think they were just saying, I think they're winging a lot of 2000. I mean, we've heard of the stories in 2014. I mean, the team was decimated. They only had like one person at full-time working on it. I mean, had the people who wrote the books were like reassigned to Magic, and then other people had to write the books. So they just literally couldn't put in any specific rules for monsters because what happens if they're wrong, and then that's why I think they left out everything. They left it all out. Because they're like, well, here's the game, here's the classes, here's the levels. How do you make monsters? Don't worry about it. How does the economy work? Don't worry about it. Just play it, have fun. And then when it became a huge hit, and then people had to actually, go back and figure out what was going on. And they're like, crap, we actually don't have the answers. Well, because we kind of wing it. Or the monsters are played, the monsters don't really have a rule set, like, or they do at different levels. I think they were too embarrassed to like put anything out. So they just never did. And the only way they could do it is just come up with a new rule set because I don't think they ever had answers, quite frankly.
And someone in chat said maybe they wrote the rules after the monsters came out because they just kind of did the monsters by gut and then tried to come up with something close. I can tell you this because I don't want this to only be about D&D 5e doing this.
Yeah.
In Pathfinder First Edition, there's a very interesting thing that happened. It's related to this topic about math. And it was involved not doing the math correctly. So I'll give an example of Pathfinder not doing the math correctly. It was in First Edition. So all the monsters in the Pathfinder First Edition First Bestiary are pretty good. Okay. Including the giants. I want to talk about the giants though. They were good. They were dangerous creatures. They hit hard. They were accurate. But then after the Pathfinder First Edition First Bestiary monsters were written, a monster creation system was written in the back. And it was, like some of the people said in chat, possibly happened in 5e. I know for a fact it was created after those monsters were written. to generally give guidelines that were that they were using roughly at the time to determine vaguely about those monsters. But the guidelines that were then written in the back of that book were a little bit stricter on what the monsters could do. And from then on, you could say to the credit or not, from then on, they used those rules that were in the back of the first bestiary to make any new monsters. They didn't just keep doing it by gut after that. Here's the problem. Because of the fact that the math was not done in an appropriate way for the offensive stat lines, and I'll explain how. Basically, in a way that is the same problem in D&D 5e, but worse for Pathfinder First Edition, damage for a monster was determined based on, well, what was the damage it could deal if every single attack hit? All right. Now, in 5e, that's not necessarily very accurate, but at least all of the attacks are at the same bonus. So if you're making generally, right? So if you're making 3 attacks at plus 10 in 5e and they each do 10 and you say that's 30, well, it's not really 30, but also the amount that it's not 30 is proportionally accurate no matter what. Like if it was 3 attacks or 2 attacks at plus 10 and you said for 10 damage and you said it was 20, it's like those will be accurate between those 2 monsters. In Pathfinder First Edition, it was the same thing, but some monsters who did a claw, bite, tentacle made 4 attacks that were all at plus 10. And giants made attacks that were plus 10, plus 5, plus 0, where they went down as you went along. And because the monster creation system in Pathfinder First Edition did not account for the fact that the giant's accuracy went down, it didn't say, well, if their accuracy goes down like a giant, give them more damage to compensate for this. It still said give them the same amount of damage. Starting from Pathfinder Bestiary 2, and this is true, you can look through them, the giants are just kind of garbage compared to some of the other monsters. You can't tell right away because their damage numbers still look equally high, but their accuracy just diminishes down. Any creature, not just giants, but any creature that's using weapons and has their accuracy go down and down is just worse than the ones making large numbers of attacks at their full bonus, because you were not even allowed, even if someone who was writing a monster in Pathfinder First figured this out and tried to account for it like the giants in the first bestiary, they would have been corrected when it was sent in-house to be like, corrected. Oh, well, your damage was too high for this. It was higher than the amount in the monster creation system. So there are sometimes situations where the system can actually be too strict or can mess things up. Now, how was this fixed for Pathfinder 2nd Edition? In Pathfinder 2nd Edition, if the accuracy is lower, then you get more damage. And then there's no way that some monsters are going to have all their attacks at the same bonus and some of them are at a lower bonus. That has been sort of standardized. And if you do have an ability to make them all at the same bonus, you're supposed to make the attacks weaker.
Yeah. And also, you can have different stats because, like, I'm thinking because, like, dragons stats are not the same as regular monsters. They just aren't. They purposely are a little broken because they're dragons. They can do a lot more than a normal monster can do. And then even different types of monsters have different types of general stats and abilities. Like an ooze is different than any other creature, really, and like a humanoid has specific abilities. And that's something else, is that you can have a generalized system like Pathfinder and yet have it very complex, because then you can have different templates based on the type of monsters. And that's something that Pathfinder does really well, is that you can mix and match template systems and then come up with like hundreds, if not millions, of different iterations of different types of monsters. So I don't know.
So I want to give kudos to Ratty Pumpkin in chat, who correctly pointed out, and this is true, that the Pathfinder Unchained simple monster creation system fixed the giant problem in Pathfinder First Edition. Logan and I knew about the giant problem. We intentionally removed it because we knew it was there. Absolutely.
So what does it come down to? This is that if you're playing, quote, a game that is, we got a
we got a 50 Canadian dollar super chat from Le Sports Rouge.
Thank you very much.
They did not come with a additional comment, but I think they're using like
It's a
text to speech, so they may do that separately.
Yes.
And we'll say it if they do afterwards.
Yes. One thing I don't remember what I was saying. Is that I don't know. In my opinion, the math and the mechanics are what make it, quote, a game. And I just find it fascinating when I was describing it to so many people this weekend at PAX, especially so many people coming up to us and they didn't know what we were selling. And then we were saying about D&D, and then we were telling them, talking about D&D and Pathfinder. And then we were kind of explaining the mechanics versus lore and how the two were kind of separate. I was just thinking how, like, it is an interesting dilemma because I like to read these books mostly for, like lore and feel, like something like this is all lore and feeling, like Epic Bastionland. And there are mechanics in here, but not really. It's mostly just talking. I think this is a very talk game, as opposed to.
So, Steven, let's have a debate on this then.
Okay.
Because I am willing to say that certain quote games are not actually games, but are activities. But I have a broader view than you. So you say you need to have math and mechanics to define a game. My definition of the game is that it has to have choice.
Oh,
I agree. It's supposed to be a game, and it doesn't have to have lots of math and mechanics, but if it's supposed to be a game and it doesn't have choice, it is not a game. So here are things that I say are not a game. Candyland, War, Chutes and Ladders are all not games because there's no choice. It progresses on its own by itself. Whereas you could make a version of those that are games where you actually get to choose what you're going to do. But War just plays itself out. There's nothing anybody can do other than just
those are not games. Those are not games. Those are you're literally watching something happen because you have no control over anything.
I call that an activity, but not a game for those. But to me, as long as there is choice, even if there wasn't heavy math or mechanics involved, then it would still be a game, like Wordle. I would say does not really have. I mean, you can use math. You can do like a probability distribution of like what letters you're trying to do for Wordle, but
Wordle's a game.
You mostly wouldn't
it's all
that.
Choice. I mean, that's what it comes down to. You need to have a choice, and if there's no choice, there's no game. That I completely agree. But I think every choice, then there's math involved. I would say one of the simpler games. Think of rock, paper, scissors. Okay, there's very little math, and it's really 1 out of 3 if you do it. But there is a choice, and I would even say poker and some other games. But those are fascinating games because those games, your choice is based on nonverbal cues. Okay,
right. Rock, paper, scissors is definitely a game.
Oh, that's definitely a game. And a lot of, the math is incredibly simple that anyone knows it, but your choice is based on who you're playing, what you think they're going to throw, their type of personality. Like it is a very fascinating game at a higher level.
There's so first of all, we got our super chat from Le Sports Rouge, who said, my bad, I didn't know you could add a comment. I love the universe you've built. You keep making them, and I'll keep buying them. That's part of having a blind life. Well, thank you so much for your support. And
yes, thank you.
It means a lot to creators like us to have people who love it and who are really experiencing it.
Speaking of which, I just got
it makes it so that it matters.
I just got these in. These are the
the Battle Dragons.
The Battle Dragon.
So many people have been looking forward to those.
I know. This is the special edition cover and back cover. This is what they come in. These
really, really nice.
These are the proofs, by the way. And then and then I got to go through this. This is the proof of the book. So this is actually what I get. It's this is actually the book. This is literally the book. It's just not. It's not made into a book, but this is the book in
That's what it
non-book.
looks
These
like
are
when
the
you're doing
signatures.
a
These are
proof
signatures.
to give the final approvals.
Yeah, this is what this is. This is literally
you
a
can
proof.
feel like you're at a publishing company if you look at those, because
And this is
that
what
was the first time I ever saw something like
this
that.
is what a signature looks like. So they send this to me, and then I have to approve it. And as long as they approve it, then they bind it into a book, and then they will send it over. So here's like my proof that I just got. So, and then that one will be done, and then we have more coming.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
So here's a question that from chat: are idle games actually games? Not the ones, not the original.
Now that is fascinating.
Not the original Idle Quest that
like
just went on its own.
I love Cookie Clicker.
But something like Cookie Clicker, where you're actually clicking and you're making decisions which things to buy, right? I would say they definitely are.
Cookie Clicker is in the same boat as not modern slot machines, because slot machines have no choice. Like old-fashioned slot machines, all you did was put a coin in and pull a lever. And that's it.
Sorry, is Progress Quest, I think, is the original idle game, right?
It is.
That was not a game because you literally couldn't do anything.
Right.
But Cookie Clicker is definitely a game.
Well, that's a game because you make upgrades and you change things. But it's a slot machine, the original slot machine where you did nothing.
I would say that's
just math, just outcome.
Yeah, I'd say that's not a game.
It's not a game, but it does tap into this primal instinct that humans have.
It's the same that causes some people to just watch Magic packs being opened, or even those eggs with the little gifts inside.
Yeah,
the kids
Derek.
would just stare at that.
Derek Melenda. It's like people who just like to watch Magic drafts. Derek loves to watch Magic drafts. So
someone in chat asks, isn't it a choice to keep pulling the lever? I say that it is not, in the same way that you could say, well, War is a game then because you have a choice to play War or not to play War. So it doesn't count as a game if your choice is to either do it or not doing it. Then reading would be a game because I have a choice. Do I read or do I not read? You have to have a choice within the game. So like that also could theoretically make for example, a choose your own adventure book a little bit of a game by my definition. Now, I'm not saying that literally everything in life that has a choice is a game, to be clear. But I am saying that.
But the game of life. I'm
not saying that.
Life is but a game.
I'm not saying that unilaterally, but I am saying that it is necessary, but not necessarily sufficient. But it's necessary to have a choice to be a game, and if it has no choice, it isn't a game. By my definition, you don't have to have the same definition of game as I do. But if you want to meet the Mark Seifter definition of game, it must at least have a choice.
No, of course. I mean, well. Then driving is a game. Everything's a game because everything is choice. Breathing and living is a game.
Saying, yes, stop or keep going. Is that a choice? That's the same for reading then. You can stop reading or you can keep reading.
Well, that is a choice with consequences. And okay, let me rephrase this. Game.
Hold on. There are consequences to a slot machine.
Wait. But there's also, you didn't let me finish. Then there's 2 points, I think. A, you need to have choice, and B, there has to be a way to win and lose. So reading, I don't know if there really is a winner or loser. Yes, you could choose to read or not read, but there's no winning. I mean, I guess if you quote finish the book, you could consider that a win state, but you know, that's subjective because some people just want to start it and they consider themselves winners by starting the book. So that is subjective. But then you have a slot machine where you put in money, you pull the lever, and then there's a chance that you can win more money or lose your money.
So I'm going to say this, and people in chat before also mentioned that you have to have a win or loss. I'm going to say that games often have that, but I don't think that they always need to. There are some things that I consider to be games that do not have a win or a loss, and instead have a score that is calculated at the end. That is, and you can say, well, whoever has the highest score. No, there are some that are cooperative games that have a score at the end, and it generally tells you, like, if you got this much of a score, you're super cool. And if you got that much, wow, you're even more fantastic. And if you got that much, ooh, maybe you should try a little bit harder. And you could say, well, I think that we need to have at least this much of a score, or else we lose. But that's you putting the win or the loss in it. The game didn't say at any point that you won or you lost. It just gave you a score and a vague sort of indicator in the back of the instruction manual of sort of like what that score means.
Yeah.
I think that rather than win or lose, maybe we can refine it to say that there must be some way of measuring the results.
Well, that could be it. Yes,
that's part of the consequences.
Yes.
It needs to have choice and the consequences or measurement of it. So in that one, there is a measurement of results. It just doesn't lead to a win or a loss. Win or loss are a very easy way to measure results and that really matter and kind of feel viscerally satisfying or unsatisfying. If you lose and you wanted to win.
Yeah, I don't know. It's fun because people are saying our visual novels, those are not games because.
So I would say a visual novel is a game.
Well, they're just.
Well, you have choices and they have consequences. Some of them even have additional game style elements.
Well,
in
yeah,
them
I'm
beyond
talking
that.
about just choose your own adventure visual novels, I guess. So. Yeah.
So yeah, like so is Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney a game?
Well, there are end states. There's ways for you to lose.
You can lose the trial.
You can lose,
and you can be kicked out. You can win the trial. You're not just like flippantly picking dialogue options. You have to think which of these pieces of evidence contradict which of these statements that the person is doing. You have to use your brain to solve the puzzles that are being presented to you. But it is a visual novel, and the only thing that you do is select dialogue options.
Well, no, you find clues.
Which, to get to those clues, you select dialogue options.
True.
Like the only way you have of navigating things is to select either a dialogue option or like an item in your inventory, which is kind of like selecting an option. Some of the later ones have more.
Yeah, no, the later ones are definitely way more gaming.
Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, the first one, the one that is
and that
called
game,
that.
Man, that has the best sound design because when you get going and you start grilling the other side, and then the music changes and it gets all tense, and then you just sit there and I can't stop playing. I'm like, oh man, that is a great game. I love that game.
Some people pointed out kinetic novels that are visual novels with no choice, and I would say those are not games, but they can be fun. Just like reading itself can be fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love to read. Well, now we're talking about something really strange because you have. Okay, we mentioned this before on the show a long time ago that my new favorite genre of novel are the
LitRPG, right? That's your favorite.
It's so much fun because it's reading a game, and a lot of them are terrible. They're all pretty bad. A lot of them are pretty bad because a lot
of them are kind of terrible.
They're all bad.
I was reading like some of these style of things, and even people were like, "Mark, why are you reading this?"
Well, they start off well, but then a lot of them...
it's for my job. Steven told me I needed to read some of these so that I could get familiar with the subgenre.
I'll tell you. Well, the problem is because they don't have editors, and then they get too lost in the game because these all start off really. A lot of them start off good, but then by the time they get to the third or fourth or fifth book, they get out of control because they get just such into the gaming. So I finally decided to read Dungeon Crawl Carl, which has been blowing up. Because Dungeon Crawl Carl was picked up by a major publisher, and they're making a TTRPG out of it. And I was like, and I love LitRPG, so I was like, all right, let me read it.
I bet you could reread it when the major publisher does their editing pass, and you might find that it's very different.
I'm reading it now. Well, no, the publisher did, so I'm reading it after.
There was a situation where, like, my little brother. There was some fantasy series. He was like, the ideas of this fantasy series are really good, but the editing and the writing is garbage.
Yeah.
But I still recommend it. And he like shared me like the book to read it. And he had an electronic copy, right? When I went to read it, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. The editing's, it's not the best writing I've ever seen, but the editing's fine. And he looked at it like, this is completely different. And he found out that a major publisher had bought it and edited it, and they gave the update to the edited version to anyone who had previously
that's standard
purchased it. and he had not realized that had happened. So you might be able to find that its editing is going to improve a lot.
Well,
if a major
and editing can only go
took it.
so far because you still need the game. You still need to be good. Anyhow, Dungeon Crawl Carl, A+. I mean, this thing is, I can't get over how good this book is fantastic. I love,
so some people in chat want to know what it is so that we can describe the idea of a lit RPG is it is a story that not only does it have tropes that are similar to the fantasy RPGs you play, it literally has like the rules of an RPG in the world. Often people can like say the word status and open up a status menu that has like their hit points and experience points and their skills and things listed on there.
Okay, so let me explain. Dungeon Crawl Carl, this is what happens. And I'm not giving anything away because this happens in the first 5 pages. It takes place on Earth. It takes place in, I think it was Seattle. It takes place, where was it? Seattle? Yeah. It takes place on Earth. It's cold. And all of a sudden, every single structure on planet Earth collapses and kills everyone. And then suddenly there's this announcement that says you can either stay on the Earth or you can, all these entrances appear everywhere around the Earth, and you can go into the entrance and join the dungeon crawl. And that's it. It's like, okay. And then he runs into this entrance because it's freezing outside, and he's like wearing no clothes just to stay warm. And then he's entered into, basically he is a character, and he literally sees his stats. Like he can bring up his stats and see what they are, like his strength, intelligence, wisdom, his, you know, he can wield weapons. He gets stronger, he gets smarter, and he will just automatically, as he levels up, get better at these things. Like eventually, if your strength, like his strength gets to the point that he's like picking up like 5 tons, you know, and obviously you can't pick up 5 tons in real life, but he can, and he knows he can, like, and that's a big part of it. Now, what makes these so much fun is that they bring up the stats, and like when he sees a monster, it literally will say level 1 goblin, and then give the whole description of what it is. And it is a freaking game. It's a combination of games, MMOs, role-playing games, and books. And once you start, it is beyond addictive. I can't stop reading these things because you would think reading a game would be boring. Well, when it's done well, the other thing is.
So Lesport Rouge asked if it was like solo leveling, and yes, I was even going to give that as an example of an international version of it that is in Korean manhwa. Solo leveling is a lit RPG.
Yes. So
it just flat out is. Many manhwa are, many manga and anime are as well. Now, not all of them are like Steven said, where they take place on modern Earth and the dungeons come to Earth. That's like a subgenre of it, which solo leveling is also in that subgenre. But there are also ones that are just in a fantasy setting where either a character comes from the real world, or maybe the fantasy setting is the same as their favorite MMO that they used to play and they got reincarnated into it, or it is an MMO that they got stuck in, or it's just a fantasy setting with RPG rules as the physics of the universe.
There's
a lot of different ways it can be set up.
And there's a lot of different ways, but there's a few things that are always the same. Is that the person who's in it knows that it's a game. Everyone who's in it realizes it's a game, and often they are using their knowledge of gaming and real life gaming to be in this game. Okay, so that's the thing. It's like it's not hidden. In fact, all the rules and stats are out there for you to learn, and there's even things like where you level up.
Sometimes there's a trope in a lit RPG where the main character and a limited number of other people have access to some of the rules, and the rest of people kind of have figured out the rules on their own, but they don't have as in-depth of knowledge as the main character, who's maybe sometimes the only one who can see the status windows and all of the exact rules of the world. Those tend to be ones that like sort of think about the knowledge advantage you would have if you actually knew the rules, whereas everybody else just kind of guessed it by seeing how it was applied.
So I'll give you some books that you probably are more familiar with that aren't. These are not lit RPG, but they're similar. Ready Player One, similar. It's not lit RPG, but there is the whole aspect of them being in a game and knowing they're in a game and leveling up and playing the game, although they're also in the real world. So that's sort of like LitRPG. The Hunger Games is kind of like LitRPG because all the three of those books are literally a game, and they know they're in a game, and they even get ranked, although they're playing themselves and they have real life. They're not in a game system. That's the other thing, is that they're actually in some world that is modifying them so they can literally change their race, their class, their ancestry, their stats increase. Like, for example, if you have an ability that lets you read any and write any language and speak any language, suddenly you just can speak and like know every language on planet Earth. Of course, you didn't know that beforehand, but because now you're in a game system, you can. So all I will say is that definitely check out Dungeon Crawl Crawler Carl. Yes, because of all of them I've read so far, this one, and as just from a writing point of view, this is not only is the world building fantastic, but it's very well written. Like, I was like, wow, I was surprised how well written this is. Like, whoever this guy is, I guarantee this thing is going to be turned into a movie. I guarantee this thing is designed. Not only that, the guy who wrote it, he must know what he's doing, because not only does it follow like the best tropes, but I'm reading this and I'm basically seeing this. It's like certain books are written to be turned into movies, and whoever wrote this knew what he was doing, because I was like, oh, this is like turning itself into a movie or a miniseries the way it's written. I was like, yeah, this thing is designed. And I can already see, because it's already everyone talking about it. It's the highest rated lit RPG. It's getting turned into TTRPG. It's being bought out by other people. I wouldn't be surprised if the movie rights were already bought out for this thing. It's really, really good.
We had some member chat and super chat from Agile Monk. The member chat is, how did Seattle go for you, Steven? I saw pretty Derek pictures. So yes. Agile Monk, you can, if you go back to the beginning of the stream, Steven talked a pretty good amount about Seattle. So you can catch that up there maybe after we're done with the main topic. And a $5 super chat says, Steven, when do you think I can get 15 minutes of your time? Good sir, I will make it efficient via GoToMeeting.
Give me a few days. I've been away for a week. So I'm now back for a month, so I can finally get some time. So don't worry about it. I will get in touch with you. But yeah, someone mentioned The Matrix. The Matrix is kind of lit RPG too, in the sense that it's very similar, is that you're a normal person, then you go into a world. And then you're in this world, and you could affect this world through actions or sub actions or quote level up, or also you can gamify the world, which is another big thing that happens in lit RPGs, is that sometimes them knowing they're like being really good at gaming, that they use their gaming knowledge to help them, and then those people do better in the game. It's really good.
Persona is not quite a video game of a lit RPG, but it is getting close.
Kind of is.
It's getting close to it, because they do go into this other world that has its own rules. Yeah. But usually, like the numbers and all the statistics of it are not something that they know about.
No, they do not know directly.
It's closer than some of the other close but not exact that we've mentioned here.
What's amazing,
there are a lot of things that are exactly lit RPGs that you can find out there, though.
Well, what's amazing is lit RPG has literally only been around for like 7 years. It's extremely new. It's a brand new genre, and no one was publishing. It's all self-published, and this, it is what always happens. And because of Amazon and the internet, they was able to be self-published. And actually, so John Statz, he has written a 5-book. That's what he's been doing for the last 5-6 years. I kind of broke him, because I met him at Gen Con and I was telling him about them. And then John read every single lit RPG known to mankind. I think he's read every single one. He reads like 1 book a day now, and he wrote a 5-book series that's a lit RPG. But John worked at Blizzard, so he's using all of his knowledge of working at a game company, and then he even had people go through all the math to make sure all the math in his game was correct and how the leveling up works. And I believe it's called The Dungeon or something like that. He's going to publish it shortly because it's gone through multiple rounds of editing and test reading. And he actually has all 5 books done at the same time. So poor John. I told him about how cool LitRPG was, and then he started reading it and he wouldn't stop. And now he wrote a 5-book series and for the last 5 years, because I was like, oops, sorry, John, I didn't mean to break your life by introducing you to this.
Maybe it didn't break his life. Maybe it lit up his life.
Yeah, I know, but I feel like this is all he does. Like, this is literally it's consuming his entire life. I was like, I just like the books. I didn't want it to consume your whole life, John. But it is fun because whenever I ask him what he thinks, of course, he's a harsh critic. He hates everything. I was like, what do you think, Dungeon Crawl Carl? He's like, oh, I loved it in the beginning. I hated it at the end. I was like, all right, dude. Well, because these books always get, like, there's more to them than just going through a dungeon. There's always like a larger aspect. And most of them have something like, well, the rest of the universe works like this. They're almost all of them the same. It's that it's like, well, the whole universe works on this game mechanic system, and you, Earth, have been added to the game, and now you're part of the Galactic Federation, and this is how we all work, and now you're stuck like this. But they're freaking addictive. They're really, really good. I'm just so mad because I wish I got the TTRPG Dungeon Crawl. As soon as I heard that, I was like, damn it. It would have been such a good TTRPG. And it writes itself. That's the best thing. Because they literally wrote a game around the book. Anyhow. They're fun. They're really fun. They're really good.
Sometimes the games in LitRPG as a professional game designer would be like, this game, and I didn't read Dungeon Crawl, but sometimes it's like, this game would not be fun for almost anyone to play as an actual game, except for maybe the main character of this series, because of the fact that they wind up getting to do all of these special things for themselves. So it does depend. And sometimes that's even the point of the game. So the point of the series is that the game is not necessarily fun because it's your life now. Yeah. And it's fun to read, even though it wouldn't be fun to play. That does make it interesting that how would you have to change the game in a LitRPG to make it actually fun to play if it wasn't designed to be fun to play in the book? So
Dungeon Crawl Carl is there's 7 books in the series, and the guy's only been doing it for a few years. That's the other thing. These books usually come out really fast. I'm up to book 3. Let me put it this way. I started last week, and I'm already up to the 3rd book. That's how much I like it.
Wow, you started it last week?
Yeah.
Was that because it came up last week?
No, because I saw someone, they signed, it came up last week because I saw that they signed the book as a TTRPG. I think it's Renegade signed it, and I was like, damn it. And I keep hearing about it, and I was like, fine, I'll read it. And I got I just bought Amazon Kindle Unlimited. So with Kindle Unlimited, you can just download, you can get as many books as you want. And actually, ever since I got Kindle Unlimited, I mean, I read a lot, but I've been cranking because I was like, because now I just, whatever I see, I just download and I just start reading it because I don't have to worry about buying it, It's kind of like, as my wife says, it's like, you could just go to the library. I was like, yes, I could, but I don't mind paying for this because I read so fast and I read so much. So also, they don't always have it at the library. They actually didn't have these books at the library, so I couldn't get it. Someone's up to book. Yeah, they have. There's a Persian cat. Yeah, there's a cat in it called Donut. It's really funny. It's good. If you want to start and see what it's all about, I would strongly recommend this series. It starts off, of all the ones I've read, and I've probably read at least 100 of these books at this point. This is the best one by far. Like, it's actually pretty, not even close. So Agile Monk's right. The LitRPG started in Russia. Russia, somehow, it was like it's extremely popular in Russia. There's always been LitRPG in Japanese culture, but they do it a little different because they do the what's it called? The one we did, the humanoids in the game system. The Mark, what's that called?
I don't know. They do too many things in Japan. I'll just start listing things they do in Japan, and you tell me when I've said the correct one.
Okay.
Are you talking about isekai?
Isekai. I couldn't remember. Yeah, isekai. Like it's kind of like isekai, but the lit RPG is a subtle difference because in these games, everyone knows they're in a game, and you can bring up your stats at any time. And you can,
some of the isekai stories in Japan do that,
right?
And it just depends, right?
Right,
and we were talking about a Korean manhwa. There's several that do that as well.
But
in fact, I've seen at least one like Japanese lit RPG where the author like makes a lot of allusions to things, and one of them it was I think. The fact that they said that the number one like dungeon person, it was one that was set in the real world, was originally from Russia. Correct. Made me think of the fact that that was an homage to the first lit RPG coming from Russia.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. I don't know if the first one, but it really started popular. It's very popular in Russia. And then they started to come out here. And they, again, the big problem with them is that usually the first or second books will be good, but then once they start getting deeper and deeper into the world, they start to fall apart, and then they get kind of bad. So, what's lit RPG? Well, you can go back. Well, 10
we
minutes.
mentioned it before, but I was typing it in chat to that person.
Okay,
that they are stories set in a fantasy game world where the rules of the game are known to the characters, or if you want to say it fancy, like
it can be
I think with the real
too,
Neutromancer, you can say that they are diegetic.
They can be science fiction because one of the other ones I like is the science fiction.
Yes, you're right. They can be science fiction. They don't have to be fantasy, but except for that, I consider science fiction to be a type of fantasy because anything is fantasy if it doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
But yes, it is definitionally at the very least not realistic fiction because we don't live in a game world, even if the game world is like a generally modern setting.
Yeah. So anyhow, have a little book club. Everyone go get Dungeon Crawl Carl, read it, and come back and we'll talk about it in a week or two.
So David Perry sent a super chat that said, I was reading the Ultimate Level 1 that used a rubber banding exploit to become extremely powerful without gaining XP levels. That's definitely a subgenre of lit RPG where to go against the ones where it's like, well, my person is the highest level maxed out. They have a subgenre of like, I'm somehow limited and I can't level up, or I have some very, very nasty debuff or problem within the game world system that everybody else can do. Or I didn't get a character class and everybody else on their 18th birthday received a class and I have none. And then they somehow cleverly you exploit the rules of the game or do something else to like make it through and survive, even though they didn't get the usual advantages.
So the reason I even brought this up is because in lit RPG, what makes the ones that are good versus the bad is that there obviously is a very specific math mechanic in the game and in the book. And in fact, John Statz, I was saying, he wrote his 5-book series and he had to literally design a game for the book, and he had to write out the whole rules of the game and figure out how the game works, because when he writes the book, the characters have to follow the game model, and if his math was off, he actually had someone go through and figure out all the math and balance it to make sure his math worked. And this is for a book. That's what's so funny. It's like it's a book, but it's based off a game, which is based off math. And they actually have to explain the math in the book, because another big part of it is that in these books, what's very common is that you work with the protagonist who has no idea what's going on. The protagonist always finds someone who is a guide or someone who is there to help them, and they know all the rules to the game, but they're only allowed, it's always the same, they're only allowed to tell them the rules for up to that point. Like, they know the rules for the game from levels 1 to 20, but you're only allowed to tell them the rules. If they're on level 4, they can only know the rules up to level 4, and that's it. And then when they go to level 5, then the rules change, or they get more abilities, and then they're allowed to learn the rules for level 5, and so forth. but then they sprinkle in little information on the later levels of how it works. And often these games are, well, if you get to the end of the dungeon, you win and you can like be set free. Or
make a wish or get whatever the thing that you're trying to do.
Right.
That is fairly common.
It's very common.
I would say having a guide who was only allowed to tell you about a certain amount of the rules, I find in the ones that I saw, that shows up, but it's not that common. You said it's like always.
Well, not always, but it's usually someone will give them information, but they only get the information that they need at the time. Because obviously if they're getting, or they'll told about information later, but they can't do anything with it at the time. So, it's like saying, oh, well, you can get a +3 sword, but don't worry about it because you can't get that until you're like level 17 or something. So it's like, okay, well, why bother now? So it's like, yeah, exactly. Don't worry about it. That's kind of what they'll say. But in like Dungeon Crawl Carl, like whenever they level up, I think they get like 2 stat points, and it's standard. Like they go through it, so it's always the same. Like, and then you can see, and then that's the other thing. They'll list the other characters that they run across, and you see their stats, and it has to work because, especially if it's like a PvP type game, they have to make sure that the game actually works. So that's where I was saying is that these are interesting because these are books based on games with math, and the math actually has to work because if it doesn't, that's usually when these books suffer, because then suddenly you're like, well, why am I reading this book? The whole point of this book is they're playing a game. And if the game and the math, the rules don't matter, then the books don't matter, which is kind of what ends up happening in the ones that aren't good, is that I don't think that they figure out the game all the way when they write the book.
Oh, I think a lot of the authors only figured out part of the game and then they come up with something else later on. And so when they tell you, oh, I can only tell you about level 4, the author doesn't know level 5 yet because they didn't have to come up with it yet.
Exactly. And that's
why we have to give a round of applause to John Statz, who did create everything for the game.
He created the whole thing. He's been and this Dungeon Crawl Carl, they definitely figured it all out ahead of time, because in the very beginning, they tell you what's going to happen like later on. He explains it all whole thing, but you only learn a little bit at a time, but they're giving hints and breadcrumbs for the rest of it. So that's the other reason I recommend it.
I always tip my hat when I can look back and be like, this person really knew what they were doing many books in advance. And you can tell.
This one you can tell
because there will have been foreshadowing the entire time versus when it just sort of shows up. You can tell when the author is just kind of a terrible author when there's no foreshadowing for a new type of magic. It shows up just because they felt like doing some random caper with it. And then at the end, they're like, we're confiscating this magic forever and no one will ever use it again, because they realized that it opened a can of worms that would mess
Robert
things up
Jordan,
in the future.
He was the worst at that because he kept changing.
No, I mean, I felt like the magic system in the Wheel of Time was pretty consistent.
Well, no, the characters, because when he started it, it was supposed to just be like a 3-book series, but then it became a monster. And then suddenly, if you notice, the characters between like book 3 and 4 changed quite a bit because they realized, oh crap, these guys were not supposed to become all powerful. Rand and some of the others weren't supposed to come like all powerful insane gods, and then they started adding new magic systems, and I was like, all right, enough of this. This is crazy. So I feel like they definitely did not think that one out all the way. I mean, I actually met him a few times at cons when he was still alive, and he definitely didn't know what was he doing. He definitely didn't have an answer because he just kept adding more stuff to every book.
He just always said, read and find out when you asked him a question.
Well, I was there when he said that, oh yeah, we will finish it where book 7 will be the end, when he was like up to like book 4. And I was like, oh yeah, well, I have it. It's like, it should be 6, maybe 7, maybe. And it just didn't. So, yeah, those books just got totally out of control. Anyhow, but I don't know. So did we answer this question? I think
we had a very interesting discussion that showed that there's a broad spectrum of answers to this question that really depend on you and your group out there. And hopefully, if you were someone who was very dogmatically all about the math, or very dogmatically saying, no, we shouldn't care about the math at all, no matter what, hopefully you took out of this the idea that while that's true for you, there might be other players who are in a different perspective And so it's worth having a conversation with them and seeing what they think.
Yeah, should there be an in-hobby schism between narrative games and crunchy games? I think there already kind of is. It's not even that
there's a kind of an in-hobby spectrum.
Yeah,
of those
it's not a
games.
schism; it's a spectrum.
I think it's valuable of having all of those types of games to exist because I can pull out the one that I feel like playing at any given time with any given group. So I have some players that, and this might sound weird, but it won't sound weird if you've already watched this show enough times that you've heard me say this before. I have some players who role play more in the crunchy math heavy games than they do in the narrative games.
Definitely.
That they role play more.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And if you send them this same player, like they'll be articulate, role playing like deeply and coming up with clever, creative ideas of what they're doing that you would never think of and be deeply engaged. And you throw them into a narrative game and they're just doing the same thing. No matter if you try to poke them and prod them and put them in a situation where they can't, they'll just do the same move in, say, Fate, which isn't even all the way narrative. It's kind of middle-ish. They would just do the same thing every time if they possibly can, or something that's as close as possible to the same thing. And that's very much not what the game is encouraging or what the game is about. And that is just a player mismatch in that particular situation. So know your players and know what they like and know what will bring out the best in them, I would say.
So Brand Holt, come on, man. He said, I'm contemplating buying Dallas, the role-playing game. Has anyone played it? First of all, that game came out like in the 80s. Second of all, unless you know what Dallas is and you're alive in the 80s, there's no way you can play it because it's based off of the TV show. And it's
is there like a mechanic in that role-playing game where if you TPK, you wake up and it was all just a dream?
No, but it is.
Okay.
It's very light.
I don't know anything about the
light
role-playing game, and the only thing I know about the TV show is the thing that I just said. So
I was alive when it was a big deal. Those night soap operas like Dallas and what were some of the other ones?
And yes, as Glenn Finney said in the chat, who shot JR? That is also the only quote I know from all of Dallas.
It was terrible.
We've completely run out of my ability to say anything about this.
Well, I never watched it. I mean, I was too young, but it used to be a big thing. These nighttime Falcon Crest. That was the other big one, right? Falcon Crest.
But did Falcon Crest have
Dynasty?
Did Falcon Crest
Roots
have
was a miniseries. Root was no, they did not. Roots is a miniseries. Dynasty was a nighttime soap opera. Falcon Crest was nighttime soap opera. Dallas was.
You had asked me,
Days of Our Lives is a daytime soap opera. That's different.
If you had asked me ahead of time, which of these two is a role-playing game, Dallas or Falcon Crest, I would have probably thought Falcon Crest sounded more like it was a role-playing game.
What was fascinating is that the Alexandria Library was at PAX, and they have they're a library of role-playing games and games, mostly role-playing games, and they have every game. And I mean every game. They came actually to our booth, and I gave them one of everything, by the way, Mark, so they can add it to their library. I have a picture. I'll send it to you. They featured us in their library.
Cool.
And I was going through it, and what was sad is they had all the games from my youth. And I mean real youth, like when I was 8.
Is that sad or is that a good thing that it's being preserved for posterity?
Well, it's being preserved for prosperity, but I was like, man, I'm really getting old. I was like, I don't know. It's like a little scary how old some of these games are. Just kind of crazy. Well, the other thing that was crazy is when I was flying there, I think on United, and they were saying how they're the oldest American airline, that they've been around for now 100 years. 100 years. And
wow.
I started flying when they were only less than when they were 50 years old. So I've been flying. Like, so I was like, so when I flew 50 years ago, and the planes were actually pretty good back then. You know, they were these huge 747, these monstrous, gigantic planes. They don't do those anymore, really. Unless you're doing international. So if I went back another 50 years, they didn't have planes. So,
well, sure.
That's how long it's been.
I mean, 1903 was the first flight.
Right. Well, my point is,
it's
like,
actually, it's shocking that United existed by 1925. I would have thought it was in the 30s.
No, there was a lot of games. There was a lot. Well, keep in mind, there was a lot of airplane.
But given that the Wright brothers flew in 1903, think about how fast that is for United to exist.
Well, that's what they would say, because in World War I, they were fighting on cavalry, and by World War II, they had jet fighters and nuclear weapons. In fact, there's a lot of history on this, of that. Like, that's one of the biggest changes in the history of war of all time in terms of technology. Like, the technology between World War I and World War II, which wasn't that far apart, it was like, what, only 40 years apart, is more monumental. Yeah, it's less. It's less. And it went from like trench warfare and cavalry and dreadnoughts to submarines, jet fighters, nuclear weapons. Like, what that is, what a difference. They didn't even have airplanes, and then they had not just airplanes, but they had jet fighters. So actually, they had some airplanes in World War I, basic airplanes. So, yeah, they still did have cavalry. No.
Actually, like,
the people at cavalry in World War I got like Poland had cavalry in World War II, and they got defeated in like 2 days. So anyone who had cavalry in World War II was defeated very quickly, by the way. So
fair enough. That's why I was like, wait a minute, so I don't think the main battles were fought with a ton of cavalry, right?
In World War I, somewhere. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt was in charge of cavalry in World War I.
I guess that's true.
Yeah. And he was in World War II. So, yeah. No, seriously. I can talk about this as a subgenre that I used to study in college even. So, yeah. No, don't talk about now. It's all AI. Now it's all drone warfare. Drone warfare is very scary, actually. It's like the stuff you see in Star Trek, where it's just all drone warfare, where there's not even people anymore. So, whoops. In fact, they are building, if you want to see, China just built a huge battleship that's just covered in drones. It's just like a drone battleship where it has like thousands of drones. And that's like our new thing, is where we have ships that are just covered in drones, and they get launched, and then they could send out just endless waves of drones anywhere in the world. So, yes. Yeah, last cavalry charge was World War II, correct. So.
Yep. I mean, I knew that there were pockets of it,
mm-hmm.
and they were still obviously doing cavalry charges, like, at least as recently as I guess World War II would have been less than 100 years ago, if you think
mm-hmm.
about it.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's also the taxis at the Battle of the Marne.
Mm-hmm.
So
now everyone's coming out, because now we're talking about geek subjects. Yes, cavalry.
There you go. Everyone wants to talk about the war-related stuff.
Well, yeah, because it's something a lot of us study. So,
Glenn Finney correctly points out that Teddy Roosevelt was in the Spanish Civil War.
You're actually right, but he was in a cavalry unit. So, sorry, but there were cavalry units in World War I. A fair number, and there were some in World War II, but most of them got defeated pretty quickly, especially if they went up against Germany. So, anyhow,
fair enough.
I think we did enough on this. So, a few things. One, that you can still back the Shadowdark Kickstarter. We actually are doing really well.
We're closing in on the second Kelsey Monster stretch goal. We were more than halfway between the first Kelsey Monster and the second Kelsey Monster.
Oh yeah, we're very close. We're actually doing very well, and we're working on finishing that up. The other thing is, next week, if you subscribe to the newsletter, we're starting something new. And crap, I need to make a phone call because I totally forgot about this. So,
okay. Yeah, you should check it out. It's going to be really fun.
Yeah. So,
I'm glad you remembered it, though.
Yes. More hearts has died in World War I than soldiers. I believe that. That I believe.
Yikes.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So we have some new stuff coming out. Have new books, new information. You'll see. You'll see. But it starts next week. So next week
It'll be
we're going to have
something
some new
fun
things
that you can participate in too.
I think everyone's going to enjoy it. And speaking of which, don't leave, Mark, because I want to ask you some questions real quick.
Okay, yes. I'm glad that we're getting that set up.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, everyone. So until next time, if you want to battle the zoo, check your newsletter next week. And you have to roll for combat.
Roll for combat!
All right.